Hi, I'm Ryan Fisher. I'm a partner at Lowe Eklund Wakefield in Cleveland. In a previous video we talked a little bit about slip and falls on snow and ice. Now I want to talk to you about another type of premises liability case. Simply because a person gets hurt on somebody else's property does not in and of itself mean that that other landowner is responsible for that person's injuries. We get a lot of calls from people who get injured in various ways on other people's properties, and I want to take you through a little bit what constitutes a case and what constitutes not being a case. You can break premises liability cases down into two categories, and that is categories where the landowner created the condition which caused the injury, and categories where there was a condition that existed that the landowner may or may not have had notice of. So an example of a condition that would be caused by a landowner might be if you're in a big box store and an employee pushes a box off of a shelf and it lands on you and causes injury. Or if you're in a grocery store excuse me, and a cooler or a refrigerator is broken or is poorly maintained and water's leaking out into the aisleway and you fall on that water. Or possibly I had a case recently where there was a building code violation where a customer pushed a door open and didn't see the step on the other side of the door and fell down and was seriously injured. So those are conditions where the landowner or the store owner created the hazard that resulted in the injury. Those are a little bit easier to prove. The more difficult and the more common cases are cases where there's a condition that exists that the landowner may or may not have had knowledge of. For instance, in a grocery store, a foreign substance on the floor, or in a restaurant, spilled soup or spilled water on the floor which causes an injury. And here's how we decide whether that's a case or not. So what we need to show, what the plaintiff needs to show, the person who brings the claim needs to show, is that the landowner knew or should have known about that condition. The legal term is notice, so the plaintiff has to prove that the landowner had notice of that condition. And there's many different ways to do it. For instance, maybe there's a box of frozen food on the floor. Well, if it's all defrosted and water is dripping out of it, it's reasonable to conclude that that box had been there for a long time. Maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour, but it certainly would be long enough to allow us to argue that the store knew or should have known that that condition was there. An example I like to use sometimes is if two people are walking down the aisle in the grocery store and one of them drops a jar of pickles, and 15 seconds later the customer behind slips on those pickles and falls, well, that's almost impossible to show that the store was somehow responsible for that condition, because the store only had a couple seconds to learn about the condition and to clean it up. Now, if that person drops a jar of pickles at 1 o'clock and another customer falls on it at 2:30, well, then a pretty good argument can be made that that store owner had ample time to learn about that condition and do something about it. So that would be one way that we would be able to prove notice against the defendant. There's many different ways to do it. Nowadays there's a lot of surveillance cameras. Sometimes the substance itself lends itself to determining how long it had been there, for instance, like the frozen food. So it's important, though, with these types of cases, if you've got the wherewithal at the time to take pictures. Take pictures of whatever caused you to fall, where you fell, where it came from. There are many other types of premises liability cases. We've only touched on a few of them, which happen to be the most common. If you get hurt on somebody else's property and you think you might have a claim, give us a call. Try to get some pictures. If you can't get pictures right then, go back and try to get some pictures before the area changes. Give us a call. We'll be glad to talk to you and review your case, and hopefully we can help you out. Thank you.